Hello, I've got another story for you. For you. Aye. Once again from this book, East Lothian Folk Tales for Children. It's written by a local author and storyteller, Tim Porteous. This one is called The Tale of the Whittinghame Yew Tree. The Whittinghame Yew Tree is over 1,000 years old. It is possible to stand next to it and not even realise it's a tree. That's because it is a layering yew, which means its branches have curved down and taken root. So the tree hides itself in a curtain of its own branches, and from the outside it looks like a giant bush. But look carefully and you'll see a tunnel-like entrance through the branches. Once inside, you will see the trunk and how the drooping branches have made a hidden chamber. A yew is an evergreen, so its needles stay in the branches all year round. This means that the chamber remains hidden, even in winter. Once, during the reign of Mary, Queen of Scots, 4 men sat under the tree. They had been staying in the small castle called Whittingham Tower next to the yew. But they went to the tree to have a secret meeting where no one would hear their conversation. But the yew tree was listening, and so it has a story to tell. I remember that night very well. The weather was awful, with howling wind and freezing rain. 4 men came from Whittingham Tower and huddled under my branches. I was a bit confused at first. Why would they come out of the tower on such a night to talk? Then I heard them whisper. "This is better," said one of them. "No servants will hear us under this tree." I realised then that they wanted to keep their discussion secret. So of course I began to listen. They seemed nervous, looking about all the time. I knew one of them already. His name was Archibald Douglas, and his brother lived in the tower. But I wasn't sure who the other 3 were. There was one who looked young and quite handsome. He didn't have a beard, and he spoke first. "The Queen hates her husband and loves me. She told me she wants rid of him." Wow, this was a great bit of gossip. The Queen loved this man and hated her husband. But what did he mean she wanted to get rid of him? Was he suggesting murder? Then an older man shook his head and spoke. He had a ginger beard and wore a tall hat. "Aye, Bothwell, that may be true, but hating him and agreeing to his murder are 2 different things." So it was murder they were discussing. No wonder they wanted to keep it secret. And the younger man, who said the Queen loved him, was called Bothwell. How interesting. Now I was really intrigued, and I listened very carefully. The handsome Bothwell spoke again. "I tell you, she will be well pleased to have him dead." "We ken a' that, but she has not agreed to his murder," said the man with the tall hat. He sounded worried. I wondered if he didn't like the idea of murder. But then he went on. "I've been involved in one murder, and I'd be happy to kill Darnley with my own hands. But I want the Queen to put her agreement into writing first." So now I knew this man wasn't so nice after all. He was already a murderer. He didn't mind murder, he was just nervous about getting the blame. So Darnley was the Queen's husband. I wondered why she hated him so much she wanted him dead. It was fascinating. They had no idea I was listening to them. There was a man with a heart-shaped, wispy beard and a round cap on his head. He spoke now. That wretch of a man must be got rid of, not just for the Queen's sake, but for ours and the country's. I'll never ken why she married Darnley in the first place. They all nodded at this. I really did wonder why so many people hated Darnley, including his wife. Was he really that bad? So, we are agreed. But how are we to do it? Asked Bothwell. We could push him down some stairs, suggested Archibald, with a grin. The others looked at him, as if he was an idiot. That's just a stupid idea, said Bothwell. Why? Said Archibald. Well, because it is. We're trying to kill him, not just break his leg. All right then. Let's throw him out a window, replied Archibald. Nah, we have to make sure he's going to be dead, said Bothwell. Well, you could stab him to death, like you did with Rizzio, said Archibald, looking at the man with the tall hat. So, someone called Rizzio had already been murdered. Who was he? I was getting the impression these men were a pretty unpleasant bunch. We need to find a way to kill him without laying hands on him, Bothwell said. That way, no one person can be blamed as the murderer. How clever, I thought. But then I wondered about these men. It seemed they were not really friends. In fact, they didn't seem to like each other at all. They all wanted Darnley dead for their own reasons, but had to be careful they didn't get the blame. I saw Archibald scratching his head and thinking. I knew he was about to make another suggestion for the murder. Sure enough, he did. Poison his wine, he said. Too risky. Someone else might drink it. Maybe even the Queen herself, said the man with the cap. That was a good point. But Archibald now looked fed up. I did feel a bit sorry for him. He made all the suggestions, and the others were just criticising them. He went into a huff. Well, since you great nobles are so clever, why don't you come up with an idea of how to get rid of him, he said, folding his arms. They all thought, stroking their beards, studying their feet, and then looking at each other. Then they walked around my trunk in different directions, all thinking about the best way to commit murder and get away with it. Bothwell suddenly clicked his fingers. I've got it, he said. Well, said the others in unison. Bothwell spread out his arms as if he was going to make a big announcement. Let's blow him up with gunpowder. There was silence as the others thought about this suggestion. Archibald shook his head. It was his turn to criticise now. But Abdi will hear that. It won't be secret, will it? But Bothwell just smiled. That's the whole point, he said. It will be a very public murder. Abdi will ken about it and be happy, but nobody will ken who's done it. The others looked at each other, nodded their heads and agreed. I could tell that Archibald was reluctant to agree it was a good idea, but in the end he did, with a nod. I thought the meeting was over, but suddenly the man with the tall hat raised his voice. But wait, we should try and persuade the Queen to agree to our plans, he said. The others murmured under their breath, so I couldn't hear what they were saying. But it seemed they thought this was a good idea. So who will ask the Queen? Wondered Archibald. The other three all looked at him. No, I didn't want to do it, he said. But he had no choice. He was given the job of trying to persuade Mary Queen of Scots to agree to the murder of her husband. But what if she says no, he asked. They all looked unsure. It seemed nobody wanted to answer this question. I wasn't surprised, as murdering the Queen's husband without her permission was treason. They could get their heads chopped off for that, couldn't they? But Bothwell said out loud what they were all thinking. We will kill him anyway. Darnley has to go. They all nodded their heads. There had been a lot of head nodding at this meeting. I think this was because they all wanted to say as little as possible. But murder had clearly been agreed, and so the meeting finally ended, and the 4 conspirators left and returned to the tower for supper. Not long after this meeting, I heard the servants talking. Darnley had been murdered, and so the dark deed discussed under my branches had actually been carried out. But it left me with lots of questions. Why did Mary Queen of Scots marry Darnley in the first place, if he was such an unpleasant person? Who was Rizzio, and why was he murdered? Did Mary Queen of Scots agree to the murder of her husband, and what happened after his death? Did Mary live happily ever after? Who were the other 2 men under my branches? So many stories still to discover. If you know the answer, perhaps you could come and tell me sometime. I'd love that. People often visit me, but do check with the people who live in the tower first. If you come and see me, listen carefully, for I might share another story of mine. That was a tale of the Whittinghame Yew Tree. Cheers.